Hey, welcome back, everyone. Welcome to the next Firepower Hour, bite-sized edition, where we're going to spend the next 10 or so minutes walking through how to configure and leverage external authentication and authorization within Firepower. My name is Paul Azzi. I'm a security technical solutions architect with Cisco, and the goal behind this recording is to walk through a 1 to 2 quick how-to configurations within Firepower that you can go out and follow and leverage immediately. So from an agenda perspective, pretty straightforward. We're going to be walking through how to configure an external authentication. In my lab, I'll be using Active Directory. We'll walk through how to leverage both internal and external authorization. In the previous recording, we reviewed role-based access control, so you can configure a variety of types of roles, which in fact would be your authorization level. And then we'll walk through on how to create users and leverage both external authentication and authorization, and then do some tests. And lastly, review audit logs to review exactly what the logged on users are seeing and or changing. So with that, here is a simple topology. We are running both Firepower Management Center and Virtual FTD, both running 6.6.4. At the time of the recording, this is the recommended version, and I am also running a Windows server that has the Active Directory configuration enabled on that server. Before we jump into the hands-on walkthrough, here's my email address if you have any questions. If you have any ideas, thoughts for future sessions, please feel free to reach out. Let us know what you would like to specifically see. Always happy to receive email and feedback. With that, let me just go ahead, close this, and jump into the configuration. So here's my Firepower Management Center. What I'm going to do before I jump into the FMC is let me go ahead and pull my Active Directory server. So I want you to see specifically what I have. So this is my server. I just pulled up the Active Directory users and computers, and you can see the domain name is sfsnort.local. And underneath that domain, I do have an organizational unit. You can tell that by the icon on the folder, and that's called Lab. And within the Lab organizational unit, I have different accounts and groups. So specifically, we're going to be leveraging the Firepower user. Even though he is an external user in this example, I'm going to have him use internal authorization, and I'll show you what that implies. And then I'm also going to be leveraging another user called the sec user, and this sec user is part of the sec team, and I'm going to be leveraging external authorization. So in both cases, the Firepower user and the sec user will be leveraging external authentication, but from an authorization perspective, I'm going to be using a local authorization for Firepower and external authorization for sec user, and by pointing to the sec team group. All right, so let's go ahead and minimize this. And the first thing I'm going to do is go to my cog, go to my under configuration, go to users, and we're going to see 3 tabs. We're going to see users, user roles, and external authentication. Let's go ahead and click on external authentication. So I'm going to create an external authentication object. I'm going to be using LDAP. So let's go ahead and get into the name, and I'm going to call this my AD external auth. Now, I want you to notice that the parameters here are essentially the host name or IP address, and then the LDAP specific parameters. And then we're going to want to, from a UI and from a shell, match attributes and as well with the group controlled access role. So this is the authorization piece. We can map different AD groups to the different roles that are created here. If you had custom roles, they would be listed, and you can then map different AD groups to those roles. And it's the same thing with the group member attribute can be leveraged here. So from an external auth, there's different options. One is LDAP or Radius. And if you select LDAP, you're going to see that there's a variety of options here. So again, I'm going to stick with Active Directory. So from an attribute mapping, the same thing with the group member attribute. If you click on the set defaults, if you tell the Firepower Management Center, I'm going to be using LDAP, I'm going to be using Active Directory, you click on this and it populates the SAM account name for you, both for the UI and for shell access, and it specifies the member group attribute that's going to be leveraging to retrieve that information based on AD groups and map them to the different roles. So from here, I'm going to come up and provide the IP address. Let's go ahead and tab down. This is 192.168.10.11. I don't have a secondary domain controller. And from a base DN, I'm going to come in here and type in domain component or DC equals SF snort, comma, DC, or again, that represents domain component equals local. And then I'm going to go ahead and type the username of who can query that LDAP server. In my case, it's the administrator at sfsnort.local. And again, notice that it does give you an example of how it's looking for that distinguished name to be identified. But I do know the UPN user principal name does work when it comes to the username. Let's go ahead and type in the credentials or the password specifically. And let's click on Fetch Distinguished Names. So this tells me it's able to bind to my LDAP server. You can actually see the, let me go ahead and select this. Yeah, perfect. You can actually see the base DNs, and we're golden from this point on. So I can come down here and do a quick test if I wanted to. Let's go ahead and test the administrator and the password and click on the test. If the above information is set correctly, it should come back and say the test completed successfully, which it did. Perfect. So let's come down here. I'm going to click on the save. And the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and turn this on. So I'm going to go ahead and enable this. It's not enabled by default. And I'm going to save and apply. So now the next thing I'm going to do is jump to users. And under my users, I'm going to create a local user here on Firepower. So notice that there's the default admin. But I'm going to create a new user, and this user will be called fpower for Firepower. So this SAM account name matches what I have in Active Directory. If I type my password here, then it's using local authentication. But if I select use external authentication method, notice that all the password policy and requirements for the password is all gone. So now, as long as this name matches what I've got in Active Directory, authentication will occur externally, but I can still control the local authorization. So I'm going to give the Firepower user admin rights. So let's go ahead and save this. And while this is saving, I'm going to go back and show you that now that it's saved, Firepower, the role is the administrator, and the authentication method is external, right? So if I go back to my LDAP server or my Windows domain controller, let's come back here, and let's look at Firepower. I'm going to go to the properties, and under the account, and here it is, fpower, and his password has been set here. So now let's minimize. And let's go ahead and log out as admin and log in as fpower. with my Active Directory credentials and password, that is. Let's go ahead and log in. So this is my banner for logging into my Firepower. If this is set up correctly, it's going to be leveraging external authentication. And here is FPower is the logged on user. If I click on threats to view, if I go in to look under analysis, and I'm looking at my network map for the network discovery, gets listed here. I can view all this stuff. So now, if I go to the COG and I go look at the audit, from here you'll see the person logged in. FPower, I can see he logged in, successful. He went to look at the dashboard summary. He went to look at the network map. So this is the audit trail I was referring to. So let's go ahead and log off the FPower user. I'm going to log back in as the admin. Again, this is the local account. And now what I'm going to do is create another user for external authentication, but I also want to use external authorization. So let's go ahead and go to the COG. Let's go to the configuration and users. And from here, I see the admin FPower. And again, this has been set internally, right, for the role or the authorization. So what I'm going to do is let's go to external auth first, and I'm going to go ahead and edit this external authentication realm that I've configured, and all I'm going to do is go to my group controlled access rule. So as an example, what I'm going to do is say, as a security analyst is what I want the sec user role to have. So from here, what I'm going to do is say CN equals sec team. So CN stands for common name or canonical name. So that is the AD group sec team. Then I'm going to put a comma, and then I'm going to say which that sec team group is in the lab organizational unit, and the domain is sfsnort, comma, DC equals local. So the path here is saying if you're a member, which is this is what this is calling out, member of the sec team, and that group is in this OU in this domain, then that is what will map to the security analyst role. So now we're using external authorization. Let's go ahead and save. And then don't forget to save and apply. Once this finishes applying, I'm going to go back to the users, and I'm going to go ahead and create another user. And this user will be called sec user. And just like the FPower user, we're going to use external authentication, but notice I'm not going to set the authorization. So from here, what we want to do is have the authorization come from an external source. Let's go ahead and save. Then I'm going to go ahead to log out and log in. Again, we can confirm here's the sec user. He's got no roles defined. It is an external authentication. Let's go ahead and log off admin and log in as sec user. And again, if we remember, we mapped him to the security analyst, which means he should not have access to a lot of the different pages except for what the analyst has. So the analyst only has the overview, which is the dashboards, the graphs, the stats, and all components of analysis. So I can come in here and review all the different events in Firepower, but there's no policies, there's no device management, there's no objects, no threat intelligence integration, there's no, very, very limited to what I can see. It's only the events type is what I can see as a sec user. Let's go ahead and log out. And I'm going to log in one last time as the admin, and I want you to see in fact, what is the authorization level that SEC user is going to have. So let's complete the login. And from here, I'm going to go back and return. And again, you can see I've got my full menu here. Let's go back to the gear. Let's go to users. And I'm going to click under the user. And here's the security analyst. And again, if you remember, I did not define this locally. So if I click on the pencil to edit, it's going to come back and say that this has been externally set, right? We map this. So I like to definitely use the external authentication. That implies I don't have to keep local accounts on my Firepower Management Center. Also, if someone leaves the organization by disabling their AD account, they can no longer log into your manager. Now, from an authorization perspective, I'll be honest, I prefer to use local authorization for the simple fact that if I'm managing my Firepower, but I don't have AD credentials to administer groups and group membership, someone can accidentally or intentionally add users into a variety of groups. And if those groups have been mapped to a specific role on the external authentication, then whenever they log in, they're going to go ahead and have that level of access. So that's why one of the reasons I'm not a big fan of using external authorization, but from an external authentication, I certainly am a big fan of this. Let me go ahead and say, let's click on here. There we go, right? So this is under the group control. That's why it says optional. You don't have to do this. This is only if you want to use external authorization. This concludes the quick Firepower Hour Bite-sized edition covering how to configure and leverage both external authentication and authorization. I certainly hope it's been a good use of your time and this has been beneficial. Thank you.